Hi. So, thank you for coming to Freiburg. I have two questions, if there is time. So it's my first time in this kind of darshan, and how can you explain what are the people manifesting as Kriyas, these kind of movements and sounds, and yeah. What is this? What is happening? And the second question is, if we are supposed to be Bliss, why do we suffer?
Well, the second question is easy. We're not supposed to be Bliss. We are Bliss. We are Bliss. So there's, like I've repeated many times, I've said this is very ancient Upanishadic saying, in Bliss these creatures are being conceived. Into Bliss they were born, and by Bliss they were sustained, and into Bliss they shall return. See, it's a kind of like also a reminder that that's all there is. You see, that the true quality that it here stands for and represents is not something that we need to get to. It's rather that what is the self-evident essence of who we are. Why is there suffering? This is another story, you see? Because what you need to here really clearly examine and look into is that what is called suffering here, unless left without a proper investigation into who is actually suffering, before we begin to call, oh, there is suffering, you see? Then we will remain in this gray area, in these gray waters. How can Bliss, and these questions, more acute questions were asked of me. In California in the early days, like, you talk about Satchitananda, how can you reconcile Satchitananda with atrocities, war atrocities, how can you reconcile it with this or that, Like questions were asked. So, there is different degrees, different levels of reality that this need to be applied and spoken to, so that we don't just begin to mix apples and pears, as the Brits say, right? So that there's clarity in understanding, you see? So, for example, physical pain, right, could also be called suffering, isn't it? It's a physical suffering, and nobody wants to be subjected to that. Yet, enough substance is injected, the body becomes inert, right? And this is how the basic principle of the surgery. You can operate on any part, on any organ, on any part of the body, and there is no pain experienced at all. Remember the Pink Floyd? Comfortably Numb, that song. You're a younger generation, so you probably don't know who is Pink Floyd and why he's pink. But it was it's a great song from the album called The Wall. It's a seminal album, and there is this song, Comfortably Numb, There is no, like they sang also beautifully back in the days between Roger Waters and David Gilmour, right? They're beautiful, like there's this. So there is no pain you are receiving at some point, David Gilmour sings, because it's that analogy. You go in, something is, don't worry, just tell me what's the problem, where's the pain? Let me ease it up. Injection. It's like, Of course, it's an allegory there, but it's given here again, you see? So there is no pain, I'm receiving, like this. This is also now to understand what is being experienced when the full gamut of all the neurons and receptacles are intact. Everything is painful. Pain and pleasure are at the tip of our fingers, literally. You see? Just follow me attentively here, because it's very easy to get lost. Lost in the argument and lost also in this. Pain and pleasure at the tip of the fingers. Sometimes it's a degree of temperature of water. When you go into that bath, that is just like painfully pleasurable, right? Until it's it's unbearable, right? Few degrees makes big difference, right? You can maybe tip your finger into 65, 70 degrees of water. Can you do that in 100 boiled water? No. Therefore I said tip of the fingers. So pleasure and pain are accompanying each other. Why? Because that's the way we are equipped. So that there is this great contrast, there is this great possibility for experience. That we're talking about now physical pleasure and pain. We can extend that now because we have to. In Tantra, we never speak about the body alone. In fact, at some point, hopefully this understanding really dawned. There's no such thing as physical body per se. The example of body being injected is a dramatic example, right? When surgery needs to be performed and body becomes a log of wood. And one can open, cut, dissect, this and that, nothing being felt. Because all the circuit of connections is closed. Nothing. Because the pain and pleasure are not experienced at the tip of our fingers. The pain and pleasure is not experienced at the level of the skin. You see? It's experienced somewhere else. So this extension now, where the physical and subtle and causal, which gives that cold covering and gives rise to this understanding of the more of the totality of the body as the coverings. In, let's say, certain spiritual traditions, it's pinpoint even, like the peeling of the onion, almost like this layer, this layer, this layer. Where does the pain begins and where it ends? You see? Just as the pain and pleasure follow each other, accompany each other, and constantly at the level where one pleasurable experience can become painful or turn into a painful one. You see? At what point that level is reached where that what is pleasurable is no longer? And at what point the pain, you see, becomes unbearable? Transferred now to the psychological state, let's say how we experience this life, situations, relationships above all else, because the greatest pain, as they say, is the pain, and I don't want to devalue the acute physical pain because some of it, incapacitate us to function. So therefore, some form of relief need to be taken. Some kind of painkiller need to be given. Something. But the psychological pain, you see, when there is a severe cluster headaches, one can literally be switched off, as it were. Receptacles can be temporarily at least disabled. But when it comes to the pain of the heart, when it comes to emotional pain, let's say emotional suffering, much stronger medication is needed, and that's where obviously a lot of the territory becomes to be overlapped. But it's the same principle of the variety, the same principle of that pain and pleasure follow each other. You see? Where the pain is being experienced, where the suffering is being experienced, is the body suffering when the body is subjected to pain? No, something is in the head. Something apparently is happening somewhere in the cortexes. Respective cortexes, that's where the acuity of the experience, because we know also there are some conditions where certain parts of our body no longer can experience anything. Terrible, but that is so. So with this understanding, we begin to, by peeling these layers, we want to find out where the suffering is taking place. And we come to the place where all these coverings cover that what is our essence, the experiencer. The experiencer, the one who is undergoing the experience. The experiencer is never touched neither by pain nor by pleasure. The one who is experiencing it is not affected. He or she or it is not in pain. You see? Because that, what we refer to as experiencer, is the light which illumines every experience. And although paradoxically that light is all there is, because without that luminosity there's no experience. That's why, with this understanding, I'm saying that there is suffering, but there's no one who suffers. You see? There is suffering, it evidently so. It will be unfair to say. At a respective level of experience, there is suffering. But there is no sufferer. There's no one who suffers. You see? Instead, there is only one who is in perpetual bliss. Get to that level. Touch that level. And you know what it means. You will be terrified, horrified, how amidst of the most terrifying and horrifying experiences, you will be in the presence of your own bliss. If you do not have enough knowledge of that and experience, it may actually freak you out. You may actually begin to think that you are a monster. And this is very well known in psychology. When we are experiencing extremely conflicting states, we are getting in touch with a fundamental core of who we are, because that core is always covered by many layers. So we are, as it were, spared, if you see what I mean. You see? But your countryman, Carl Jung, delved into this with great precision, clarity, and extraordinary insights when he was in his writings, in his musings, in his investigations, precisely into these psychological states where that kind of so-called monstrosity meant to be encountered in order to bring sanctity to who we are. Of course, it has this religious underpinning which Freud was desperately attempting to overcome, because he was belonging to that generation, to shake itself, to strip itself of all these layers, of all these centuries, of all this religious indoctrination. And yet, of course, it's inevitable that he would be himself colored by that understanding. So he brought that Christian analogy there. You see? So therefore, this is answer in a way contained in the question. See? If there is this bliss, as you said, as your second question, why is there suffering, right? You can now have that answer within yourself. You see? That suffering is still bliss. You see? That suffering has no place on its own. It is still steeped in bliss, rises in bliss. This is most liberating experience. And some people are pushed to the edge of that experience by whatever degree of that, what they go through in life, know that. So they become baptized by that experience. They become purified by that experience, what they have to go through. And they know then, they become living exemplars that this indeed is so. And in speaking to this now, your first question, if you can just touch on that. Bring the reminder, please.
Yeah, I wanted to
Oh,
know
yes, Kriyas.
about the Kriyas.
Yeah, the Kriyas and why it manifests, right? And, well, I'll give a short answer because I think this area in particular is very well covered. We have a lot of information about that in our YouTube channel. We've been speaking about it over the years, and like also taking a stab at different angles at that topic, very complex topic. But the understanding here is that everything here, you see, which expresses itself involuntarily, like when we speak about Kriyas, the first important distinction, so we don't confuse people who, let's say, encounter the term Kriya in its relation to certain spiritual methodologies, paths, or practices, like, let's say, Sudarshan Kriya Yoga of The Art of Living, founded by Sri Ravi Shankar. Or going further back in time, a Kriya Yoga founded by Paramahamsa Yogananda, which was brought to the West by Paramahamsa Yogananda, but really founded by his master Yuktiswar, Sri Yuktiswar, right? We're not talking about Kriyas utilized by Yogi Bhajan for his Kundalini Yoga system of exercises. Because they also call it Kriyas, you see? So I presume what you speak of Kriyas is this involuntary Kriyas, that involuntary movements that a lot of people now begin to experience more and more and more, becoming really commonplace. So this is all due to the heightened pranic activity and activation of life force, which prompts the release of the samskaric tendencies. You know that term, samskaric? Yeah? So this release of these psychic tendencies is accompanied by these various movements. These various movements are known for that. They are, in fact, an attempt of the body, as it were, to shake itself of any accumulated stress. Sometimes it's apparent that it's literally, it even looks like that body wants to shake itself, shake itself. And we know that this shaking is being utilized, hijacked even by practitioners in some of the disciplines, that it's very good for you, it's very good for the body to be in that kind of, state. So this is already to say that this is an inner intelligence begins to work, so that the body, as it were, rid itself, body again, spoken in complex, not just physical body. The Kriyas may belong to ancestral karmas, and they manifest as physical postures and physical movements, and it's a shaking of this psychic material that we have inhabited and inherited even, you see? So it's not just something that physically happened to me. And now my hand is like doing this all the time, doing that all the time, my leg. But there are Kriyas also that are vocabulary of, let's say, we give it a bit more of a flowery language here, a vocabulary of the way that the goddess expresses herself. So this is like the gamut of all these known and unknown asanas, pranayamas, postures, breathing exercises, various kinds of mudras. All this is because the energy moves, prana moves, and that inner intelligence guides that process. On one hand, it's the shaking off, right? Getting rid of that, what no longer needs to be assimilating, because it's not really getting rid of anywhere, but it's simply assimilating. And as it assimilates, it is accompanied by these involuntary movements. On the other hand, it also has direct purpose. For example, it needs to, let's say, do certain work that is necessary for greater amount of prana to be generated in some parts of the subtle body, because subtle body withered and now being rebuilt. It now being restructured, rebuilt, opens up, pathways of energy open up, So it looks from chaotic, sometimes pictorially almost unpleasant, or at times even repulsive, or not photogenic, right? To a more symmetrical, more composed, more beautiful to behold, becoming photogenic, you know. Suddenly, you know, there's this poise, grace, you know, and it's done. So it has a different now agendas, as it were. It's no longer shaking off something, it's strengthening that prana. The prana now moves to stabilize, bring greater stability into the subtle body, because greater and greater aptitude of energy is being released. And the great aptitude of energy, when it's released in unprepared light body, it's a disaster. It's like disaster, you know, like fuses, like where the change, there's a fuse box, poof. It can't, the surcharge of the network of the house with all this wiring and electricity cannot sustain enough light required for the house to function at its optimum. So the main fuse go poof down, right? That's just a gross example, but that's what happened on the level of the body. So you need to kind of like, you know, so therefore, this is also, these movements are safety valves, they're safety procedures within the body. So the body is being prepared, so as to withstand the greater amount of energy as equals here with great amount of consciousness. Because we cannot separate consciousness and energy, very important understanding. In tantric terms, in the Shaiva terms, it's spoken simply as Shiva is Shakti, Shakti is Shiva. So the source and the like consciousness, right? Consciousness or awareness, like this. Spiritual teachers split the hair between awareness and consciousness. We can, but we don't have to. But if we do have to, we can even say awareness and the power of self-awareness, which is that Shakti, are inseparable, always one. See? So that's about the Kriyas.